Hello, YouTube. I am Joseph Warren, and I'm so excited to be back today because I have a live interview that I'm doing with a good friend of mine, Jill Piazzi. And she is an expert. She is someone who's very knowledgeable in the field of finding care for loved ones, for older adults who have issues such as dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinsons, and things like that. She's very passionate about what she does. So when I first met her, I was just very impressed by her passion. And I said, hey, we should do an interview about this because it can help a lot of people. It's a very common issue. I know it's touched my life, dementia. I've seen Parkinson's affect other people's lives and families. And she really helps them to make those tough decisions. And she does it in a loving, caring way, which is, I find it very beautiful. She has spent her life, so she says she found her love for older adults at 8 years old, volunteering, feeding the blind. She, helps with activities, helped with physical therapy, and she would sit with surrogate grandparents and listen to their stories. So really collecting that wisdom. We're definitely going to talk about some of that wisdom that you've learned. And she has a master's in social gerontology with an emphasis in adult learning. She's also someone who's passionate about public speaking like I am. So I met her through speaking at a group called Oasis Lifelong Learning, where we help older adults, people 55 and older, to learn about different things. Her with care management, me with finances and money management. And she owns Gray Matters, which is completely independent. They're not beholden to any third parties. And they focus on helping their clients to make the best possible decisions about healthcare, care in general, and just decisions that need to be made as people get older and sometimes lose just some of the freedoms that they used to have. Jill, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. I'm so excited to be here today.
Thank
and
you.
I thought we would start with, first, let's just start with something unrelated. Just tell us something about yourself that's fun, just to get it going.
Something fun. I enjoy hiking and kayaking. So my husband and I got a tandem kayak recently, and we took a trip in our travel trailer. So we got to kayak on different lakes and fish. And so we enjoy the outdoors, but I also enjoy creative work. I like to make jewelry, and I'm trying to learn how to do silversmithing. So I've had classes in the past, but I need to hone my skills, get better. So
that's awesome.
About me.
Silversmithing, that sounds really amazing.
I know, it's fun. Yeah. Hammering metal, it's fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Probably, I'm guessing it might be cathartic too.
Like a blacksmith.
Very cool. Yeah. That's awesome. And we were going to talk about your experience advocating for older adults, really being a champion for older adults on both sides. So you've kind of seen both sides of the industry with your own business, but then also with, I think, being on the vendor side. You talked about that a little bit. And I want to start with, you said you started at 8 years old. You discovered that passion for helping older adults. How did that begin? What's the story of how you found that passion and how you ended up becoming the owner of your own business, Gray Matters, where you help people make these tough decisions?
Well, I think in both cases, whether it was when I was 8 or as an adult, I think it was just because I wanted to change, and I wanted to make a change. So when I was 8, I lived in some apartments where there wasn't much going on. Mm-hmm. And my neighbors asked me to come to the local nursing facility down the street. And I didn't know what it was. And I actually ran out of there like upset. I ran out because one of the residents, I remember her name was Myrtle, and she had this wild hair and she was screaming. So probably had dementia, which back in the 70s, we didn't call it that. Yeah. And I remember leaving pretty upset, but then it was the challenge of, hey, is Myrtle going to scare me again? So I can't say that I went in it with total passion and wanting to be altruistic. It was more about, hey, I wonder if I can tolerate this. Well, then I ended up really loving the residents and being involved. Got to do things that a lot of kids wouldn't get to do today in a facility. This was back a long time ago. So got to help feed people that were blind in their room. I'd be by myself with them feeding them, or I'd be helping physical therapists do exercise with a resident, or doing an activity. So it's interesting. And then starting my business, I kind of got tired of working for other people that maybe didn't have the same mission and values. And I really felt like, my social work experience, working in nursing facilities, and also working in mental health could be utilized as a private care manager. So I started doing research on companies in California and found that there were a number of private care managers that were running successful businesses. So I thought, hey, I could do this. So I was in Austin, Texas when I started, and that was about 20 years ago, because my daughter was not quite born yet. So
Oh, wow.
started in Austin, and then I revived the business here only 8.5 years ago. So yeah, I had a little gap and then started back. So
Very cool.
yeah.
And you mentioned a few different things here. I had one question. What did they call dementia in the 70s? Did they have a name for it?
Well, I don't really remember in the 70s, but when I started in my career, which was 1991, I'm going on 30 years in July that I started in this industry. They used to call it things like senility, which they probably called it back in the 70s. And also the other term was organic brain syndrome, was what I used to hear when I worked as a social worker in long-term care. So things have really evolved over these 30 years, where we have different types of dementia, right? You don't just have Alzheimer's, you have Parkinson related dementia, and you've got vascular dementia, and all different kinds. So yeah.
Okay. And another thing you mentioned is when you started Gray Matter, you were able to focus on what your mission and your values were. And that's of course different when you're working for someone else, because it's what their mission is.
Right. Well, a lot of times in the industry, it's real bottom line. And so I think we see that when you're working in like retirement settings or care settings that do home health or hospice, everything is very, measured, and it's all about, it's all about profit. And that's not something that I wanted to focus on. Yes, we have to make a profit in business, but I wanted it to be more about the quality of the work, and not so much, what we're getting, but how we can help older adults. So,
yeah. What are some ways that plays out in your business, like where you fulfill that mission of providing really quality? If you have any examples or any stories of that, of providing that top level quality?
I think just being there through the good and the bad, it's, you have to kind of put aside your own feelings, right? And your own struggles, and just focus in on that other person. So whether you're having a bad day or having stuff go on in your own family, you leave all that aside and you really focus in on this person and their family. So it's not just the client, isn't just the older adult, it's the unit, it's the whole family. So I work with adult children. I could be working with neighbors or extended family. So that's what's really cool, is it's become this, like, I call it like the team, team, it could be, team Jill or team whoever. So you're working on this unit and trying to make sure there's enough support so that this individual can either age in place at home or be successful in a community. So it's being with them through good and bad, even at end of life.
Wow. And that must be, I'm sure, a great journey, a very powerful thing to be included in that journey with the family.
Yeah, it is. You feel like you're part of the family. Back in the day in aging life care management, they used to call us the surrogate daughters, but some people would frown upon that because we don't ever want to take the place of the family, right? We're not the daughter, but you do kind of fill a space in that family member's life, in the family's life and in the older person's life. So you do become pretty close.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What are some lessons you've learned during your time, either in working in the mental health industry and social work? What are some lessons you've learned from that, or some stories that you have from that time?
Well, I think some of the lessons I've learned is to, I guess, not to take things super seriously. I mean, we have to laugh because you can see some pretty hard stuff, whether I was working in long-term care or working in mental health. You see people with chronic mental illness, right? And so those individuals have had some pretty tough times, but it's trying to find the humor in things and also be that positive light for them and to find the good, and also to give hope, because for some people, I think even with dementia, they feel like it's hopeless, but living in the moment may not be so bad, right?
Yeah.
We see that with our family members that have dementia. They may not remember what just happened 10 minutes ago, but you're in that moment and just relishing that time with them. Or you're reminiscing. You're going back and looking at the past and talking about, their experiences and sharing.
Very cool. Very cool. What are some stories that are memorable from your time advocating for older adults that you can remember?
Well, I think even back when I was in Austin, I had a client that I got really close to, and she was in a nursing facility and she had had cancer. So she had a laryngectomy, so used a speaker box to speak with. So it was kind of hard for her to communicate. She also had dementia, but I really felt a passion working with her, going with her to her oncology appointments, being at her care plan meetings in her facility. And she really loved dogs. So anytime a dog would come into her facility, making sure that she got to that activity. So just making sure there were positive moments in her life and it wasn't just surrounded by the medical care. So her name was Jerry, and I still have pictures of her. And this was, 19 years ago, but she made an impact on me. And I was with her to the very end as her care manager. She never had children. So that's what's interesting in my work is I've come across a number of older adults that never had kids. So then who's the supporter, right? It could be a long distance relative, it could be a neighbor. So in this case for Jerry, it was actually a family friend who lived in San Diego. And so I helped her kind of navigate different systems, and I was the support and advocate. And I'd report back to this lady who was the power of attorney. But got to be with Jerry at the very end, and it was very meaningful. I had private caregivers helping her in her facility, also keeping her comfortable, and we used hospice. But it was just a really cool experience. And I still do that today. I've got clients I'm with long-term for years. And then I have clients I'm with just on a consult. So it may just be short-term where I'm guiding the family and I'm coming up with a plan of care and I'm problem solving. So it could be short-term, which is also very beneficial and meaningful. But really what's the most meaningful in my work is being with people long-term and getting to see things evolve and things improve. I had a client who was older gentleman in his 90s and had cancer in the past, had some dementia, and wanted to go back home. So I moved him out of a nursing facility and got him back home, got caregivers through the bulk of the day up until bedtime. I got him connected with the VA so that he had a nurse practitioner come into the home and monitor him because he was diabetic. And then I also did his funeral plans. He had nothing set up. And I'm grateful I did that because he ended up dying not quite 2 years after I started with him. So I'm grateful that we got through that process and got everything lined up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few issues that I'm sure people deal with as they start either aging themselves or they're watching their parents age or grandparents age. One is that I'm sure these are hypothetical scenarios. What would you say to someone who is overwhelmed with all the responsibility of caring for somebody?
Well, and I just did a talk on this recently, Joseph. It's interesting. I just spoke on caregiving burnout, or some people say exhaustion. But I think we have to be careful about what we take on. As an adult child or family member, we need to be able to ask for help. And so sometimes that's hard. I see people that want to do it all themselves, or maybe they're a spouse and they feel like it's their duty to take care of their wife, but maybe they're having their own health issues, right? Or they're neglecting themselves. They're not getting to their own doctor, or they're not eating well, or they're losing sleep. So I really advise people that are the caregiver to reach out to resources. The Area Agency on Aging, I always bring them up because they're the best kept secret out there. I am a contractor with them through a caregiver support program, but they also have a lot of other great programs like benefits counseling or to teach people about insurance or different products and things. And it is a federally funded organization, so there's no cost to utilize their services. But I also want to make sure people have resources so they could do that job, right? If I have to do hands-on care, what does that look like? Can I watch a video and learn how to do safe transfers? Or can I learn more about Alzheimer's by going to the Alzheimer's Association? So I really work hard at having a lot of resources in my tool belt, and I share this with clients.
Okay. Awesome. And you mentioned the best kept secret was the Area Agency on Aging.
Yes.
What is that? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So they're under the Alamo Area Council of Governments, which is a local entity. Mm-hmm. And the Area Agency on Aging, this is a national organization that gets funding through the Department on Aging. So a lot of metropolitan areas have what we call AAA or Area Agency on Aging. We have Bear in San Antonio, and then we also have Alamo in the same location, and that's outlying counties. So they do a lot of different things. They do information and referral. They can send out a contractor to help someone modify their home, like put in grab bars or a ramp if they can't get a wheelchair into the home. They also have the benefits counselors that help people understand Medicare or supplements to Medicare or Medicaid. Mm-hmm. They also have a veterans program under this. They do caregiver support, which is the program I contract with. I'll be going on my 3rd year with them as a contractor. And there's numerous contractors in this program. So we have someone that talks about how to plan for end of life. We have a gentleman that has a business that also teaches people how to do hands-on care, like how to do the safe transfers in and out of a bed or a wheelchair. And then there's also a lot of education. So I do the education piece and, counseling. I'm not a counselor, but have had a lot of years as a social worker. So listening and trying to help the caregiver navigate and how to problem solve. Okay. Plan ahead.
Yeah. That's awesome. You mentioned some other issues, and I want to ask you about this. You mentioned when you first started 8 years old volunteering, there was a lady there who was yelling, very angry. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that nowadays? I'm sure that could still happen, or it has happened during your career. How do you deal with something like that, where it's an angry person that you're caring for?
Yeah, so a lot of times you see that either with mental illness. So I've had that even when I worked in nursing facilities. I remember a resident that slapped me with her shoe. Wow. She like slapped me across the face with it because she was schizophrenic. So sometimes you see psychotic behaviors, whether it be with a chronic mental illness like schizophrenia, or you could see that too with a dementia like Alzheimer's. And so one thing that I try to do is look at what triggered this behavior. So you have to kind of look at, could there be something going on with this person, like pain or hunger or discomfort, or maybe there's too much stimuli, like it's noisy. They're in a setting where there's lots of people talking and it's overwhelming. So trying to redirect or trying to diffuse the situation by getting them to a quiet place, or seeing if they want some food if you think they're hungry. So you're trying to kind of problem solve and figure out what caused this to happen, and also looking at how we communicate. So using simple phrases and words, not giving too much instruction, looking the person in the eye, being calm. So I just try to use the skills that I've learned over many years, and I try to share those with my clients and their families, especially the caregiver that's doing the day in and day out work.
Yeah. So they know. That's awesome.
Yeah. But it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And what works for one person may not work for another. So it could be, let's try this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this. And one thing I tell professional caregivers that are paid caregivers, I'll tell them, hey, if you see your coworker has a solution to the behavior, then find out what that is. And you need to try to mimic that. Right? Because some of the things that are difficult are like tasks like bathing. A lot of times when you try to bathe someone with Alzheimer's, those behaviors can start up because there's a loss of control and there's fear. Sometimes they can't see how far down the tub is because depth perception changes in the brain. Our ability to be able to see things clearly changes. So maybe we're doing things to alter the environment so it's easier for that person to feel comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like a huge part, like it takes a lot of patience to do what you do.
Yeah.
And that's something that doesn't always come naturally to people. So I wanted to see if you have any tips for being more patient for caregivers or people in general.
Yeah, I think it's like, when you, and I can't speak, I can't ever say that I understand what a caregiver goes through that does this 24/7 because I'm not in their shoes. So I totally, applaud anyone that could do this, especially day in and day out, year after year. It's not an easy task. So I can't compare my time to what they do, but one thing that I do myself, if I'm in a stressful situation with the client or I'm trying to teach my family member what to do, is taking a break. Even if you walk away for 10 minutes and come back, that could be helpful because that person may have forgotten why they were angry or why they had that outburst, right? So it could be taking a break, doing deep breathing. So I actually deep breathe in my car before I go into stressful situations.
Oh,
I
wow.
do some real deep, diaphragmatic breathing and just try to, pray or do things to kind of help myself even gear up before going in. And then also finding different ways to alleviate stress, like exercise, I think is really important. So for caregivers, if they're able to either take a walk and get a break and just be out in nature, I think that's really helpful.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think those are good tips because I think we could all use a little more patience.
Yeah, anybody, right?
Yeah.
Not just the caregiver.
Another issue that I could foresee happening, these are all hypothetical, is families fighting. How do you deal with that? Families
Yeah, it
fighting.
happens quite a bit. In fact, I joke with some of my families, like if they all get along, I say, I want to study you. I want to, I want to write about you because it's kind of rare to have everybody communicating and working together. It's not always the norm, which is unfortunate. But sometimes there has to be like a family mediation. I've had to do family meetings where maybe we're not in person, especially today, right? Not everybody's getting together in person, but you're doing a Zoom or you're doing a conference call and you're trying to hear everybody out, hear their side and hear why they can't contribute. What I see is in my industry is a lot of times there tends to be one person, and we used to call it the dutiful daughter, but it could be the dutiful son, and they tend to do the bulk of the work. And sometimes there's siblings that jump in and or can be critical, or they're not helping at all, or they don't even offer. They don't ask their sibling, hey man, what can I do to be of support to you? Can I pay a bill, or could I have a meal delivered? Or so sometimes it could be pretty isolating for the caregiver. So I see a lot of infighting. There's a lot of family dynamics that stem back from our childhood, right? Like if I didn't get along with that sibling as a kid, and here I'm in the throes of being the caregiver with that parent, how are we going to get along today if we've never gotten along, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it is tough. It really brings things. And the final thing I wanted to talk about was thankfully something I've never really dealt with on a deep level, which is dealing with death of loved ones. And, dealing with that also, you deal with it through work. Any tips for that, with death and grieving?
Well, I think, we need to start planning now, right? Like I was kind of mentioning earlier through the Area Agency on Aging that there's a business that does end of life planning. So ideally we all have a plan, right? Like someone like you that could talk about the financial piece, but there's also the legal piece, right? We got to have all our documents in order. Do we have our powers of attorney lined out? Medical and financial, our durable power of attorney. Do we have a directive to physician that tells everybody what my wishes are if I'm terminal? Do I want to be put on life support or not? Do I want to die at home or not? So those conversations need to be had while we're still healthy and still have our faculties. because I come across people that nothing was communicated because it's uncomfortable. And then we end up where families are second guessing. And that's where sometimes the infighting happens, right?
Yeah.
Somebody say, you know, well, mom would never wanted that. Well, if mom never had the conversation, then how do you know? So I think have a plan, appreciate our loved ones today and be grateful and, you know, spend quality time, right? Don't put off, because there's a lot of people I talk to that have regrets. And I heard it from my own grandfather regretting that he didn't get a college degree. He took courses, he was career military, he moved around a lot, but he didn't take advantage of his benefits through the military to get a degree. So he always had these regrets, he always talked about it. So I think it's important as we're all aging, you know, do we take care of our own business, whether it be legal or financial? Do we have the conversations, have meaningful conversations? And do we, you know, do that bucket list, right? Go to that place you've always wanted to visit, or read that book you wanted to read, you know, because life could be short. We never know. And I've been around a lot of death. I've been around a lot of it, and it's not ever easy.
Yeah, I get that. What's something, this is off topic, what's something that's on your bucket list that you have?
On my bucket list, I want to go to India.
Okay.
I love Indian culture and food, so that would be one thing I'd love to do. Maybe when things kind of calm down, right? Got to have that right timing, but yeah, I would love to do that. And I don't know, I would love to take up playing the drums again. I played in high school, so hey man, girl rocker band or something.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
I don't know. Yeah, have a lot of like just bucket list items. So
was it rock or punk? What did you guys play?
It was actually kind of punk.
Okay.
Yeah. We weren't very good. We were more the garage band. We played a lot of Louie. So not too exciting, but it was more about the experience, you know, than the product.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you for we talked about a few, but some practical tips for finding and providing care for older adults and just making these tough decisions in general. Right. What are some tips or little known things that you wish more people knew out there when it comes to providing care and finding care for older adults?
Right. So I think finding care, obviously a lot of this, unless we have family support, it's out of pocket. So ideally, we're thinking about the financial side, right? How am I going to pay for this? And maybe it's not the traditional way. Maybe I don't have the assets to pay for this, but maybe I need to think about, am I going to consider having a roommate, you know, do some, this is something in California, but like people that co-share a home and share resources. So whether it's sharing that housekeeper or we're pulling our resources together to pay for services. So that could be an option, but that can also help me save money later so I could pay for my care, right? Maybe we're sharing a caregiver. So that could be kind of a strange way to do things, but it is a way to do it. That some people, I think we're going to see more of that as our boomers are aging. We're going to have more creative ways of thinking about care, but also looking at, maybe I don't have family here, so am I going to work with my neighbors and get to know them? And maybe there's things I can do, almost like a barter system, right? Like maybe I'm really good at reading or math and I'm going to work with their children. And in return, they're going to come mow my yard or bring me a meal. So that's a form of caregiving, right? It's not that they're doing hands-on care. They're not bathing me, but maybe I just need some additional support or someone I can call in an emergency. So get to know your neighbors, get to know people from your synagogue or church, and have that team of people that you can go to if there's a crisis. The other thing is planning ahead. I think, again, just be thinking about, you know, talking to my adult children and saying, hey, you know, when I need care, maybe I'm going to move closer to you because we don't live near each other, so that you're not having to take off work and fly in to come and help me, especially if I'm in a hospital situation. So think ahead about what it looks like as we're all aging, and how are we going to be independent, and how is this going to be successful?
Yeah.
Right?
Those are some great points. Thank you.
Yeah.
You kind of sparked an idea of my head of what do you think the future of your industry is, or the future of caring for older adults is?
I think it's going to grow. We're going to see more high-tech options. We're already seeing that today. You know, people are using more and more apps and programs to be able to provide care and keep tabs on systems like medication management. So we're having an evolution go on right now, but I think it's going to be even larger as we're all growing older, right? We're going to have more options, but hopefully we don't lose that human touch, right? We don't want it to be so high tech that we lose that connection with our loved ones.
That's awesome. I think that's a great point. Wanted to ask about some specific ailments that sometimes affect older adults. I know with dementia, that's affected my own family, one of my grandparents, and I'm not sure exactly what type it is, but I know it's like my grandma has dementia, and it can be tough sometimes. It's like a wave. It's like sometimes very lucid, like the same person, and then sometimes it's almost like a different person, if that makes sense, that you're talking to. What are some tips for caring for people with dementia, being compassionate for people with dementia, or just helping them make good decisions and being as loving as you can to them? What tips do you have for that?
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. It's being loving, right? If we come to someone with love instead of irritation and frustration, I think they sense that, because even if someone is progressing in this disease and the communication is lacking, they could still sense your willingness to be there and be in the moment. You know, what is our expression on our face? What kind of tone do we have in our voice? Are we agitated because we've had to answer that same question 10 times? That's the big behavior with Alzheimer's, is repetition. The person can ask you the same thing or say the same thing over and over and over. Like, when are we going to eat? You're like, well, you just ate. When are we going to eat? And so it's that constant. So really, like I said earlier, is getting the breaks and having maybe a support group so you could talk to other people that are in the same boat and get ideas on how to cope. But a lot of it comes down to the communication. It's listening to the meaning behind the words, because sometimes the words are lost. With Alzheimer's, people may not have the language any longer, and they're also forgetting. So you have to kind of understand what the meaning is behind it, what's the emotion, and be able to, you know, almost guess sometimes, you know, okay, do you want to go to bed? You're tired, or are you wanting to eat? And that's really in the latter stages. Someone in the early stages may be frustrated because they realize that they're forgetting. And it can be a little bit of a battle to get that person to relinquish, especially if I'm still wanting to be fully independent, but things are becoming problematic, like paying my bills. That's something that happens early in the disease, is the ability to keep track of our finances and to calculate, to even balance a checkbook could be difficult. So that's kind of one of the early signs. So ideally, if you know that that's happening, you're going to that loved one and saying, can I just assist you? I don't have to take it over, but can I help you with that? So coming at it, you know, from a loving perspective and being patient, like you said earlier, patience is definitely a big part of it, and having a plan, you know, because not everybody progresses the same way in this disease. Some can progress quickly, especially if it's early onset, meaning that that person had it maybe before the age of 60. That's very progressive. But most cases, the typical Alzheimer's case can sometimes last anywhere from several years all the way up to 10 years. So it could be a long-term progression.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask you about Parkinson's. That's another thing that's affected some people in my extended family. What are some tips for caring about that? What is that? I know some people may not be familiar with what it is.
It's a type of movement disorder, and it's in the brain where the person has a lack of dopamine. So what you see is sometimes, everybody's kind of different with Parkinson's too, but you see sometimes rigidity. That person can be very rigid, or you'll see the tremors. which usually is happening in the hands, and sometimes a stoop posture, where that person can have that head forward, and so they can become a fall risk. And also the shuffling gait is another part of the physical part of the disease. A lot of times as the person progresses with Parkinson's, they start to lose the ability to amplify and speak. So there's exercises. So one of my big tips to my clients that have Parkinson's is to do the move big exercises, which are very exaggerated movements where you're stepping out and you're doing move. It's called move big. And they also have speak loud, where you're really exaggerating your words and speaking loudly. You know, you're saying 1 exercise and 2. So that's one way to train your voice to amplify, and you're doing exaggerated movements because shuffling is small, right? So ideally we're working on balance, and you're working on strength, you know, because sometimes if a person is afraid of falling, they're going to sit a lot, and then we atrophy, our muscles atrophy. So exercise, whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, is really key. And it's a good way to kind of slow down that progression a little bit. If we're in good shape and we're eating well, then we can kind of slow things down some. And taking those medications too. There's important medications with Parkinson's. Levodopa, carbidopa is important. People are taking different types of meds. Maybe they're taking an antidepressant also, because sometimes depression kicks in. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It actually those sound like fun exercises.
We have to get you in on some of those.
I'm down. Just let me know.
You can lead a group.
You mentioned
there is a group online through Warm Springs. There's a group called Annie Munoz Family, and they do Wednesdays, I think at 11. So through a program called Connectability, and it's the word connect and then ability, through Warm Springs Medical Center. They have a lot of different support groups, but the Annie Munoz Parkinson's group is really helpful, because they do, right now it's virtual, but they were meeting in person. And they also sometimes bring a speaker on, so they'll have a neurologist talk, or they'll have a pharmaceutical rep talk about a medication. So it's kind of exercise, support group, and education.
That's cool. Exercise the brain and the body.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Just briefly, because I'm not sure how often you work with schizophrenia. Any tips for working for schizophrenia? Because that seems like that might be a little bit tougher in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, back in my mental health days, I used to work in partial hospitalization, where we had different tracks. So we did like an older adult track for persons with depression and mood disorders and anxiety. And then we did a track for chronic mentally ill that were mostly schizophrenic. And the big thing is that these people are receiving psychiatric help, you know, that they're getting consistent medications and support. And again, back to exercise and diet, that they're receiving good care, whether they're at home alone or whether they're in a care community. We were mostly at that time caring for individuals, mostly males, in personal care homes or boarding type homes. Many of these individuals were on Medicaid, they were on disability, so they were getting Medicaid, they were low income. So the resources could be kind of minimal, but they were utilizing programs like through the Center for Healthcare Services. That's a great resource for those with chronic mental illness. They have doctors, they have nurses, they have social workers that are doing the case management piece and making sure that they get to their appointments and that they're getting the medications they need.
Yeah. You mentioned mostly males, and I'm curious, does schizophrenia tend to affect males more than females? Because I think of males when I think of schizophrenia.
I know, and I do too. And, you know, I don't know that stat, so that would be something interesting to look up. I'm kind of thinking that is the case, but it may just be my own experience that we treated more males in these programs. We did have a few females, but not very many. So that would be an interesting stat to look up, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You go through the National Alliance for Mentally Ill, NAMI, or one of those groups and see what the statistics are. But
let me have Jamie pull it up. I wanted to ask you a question. This is another thing that has also affected members of my extended family. With a caregiver coming in for an older adult who had trouble doing a lot of stuff, eating, making food, walking around, and forming a like almost a codependent relationship with her, and then trying to get access to all her basically financial resources.
Yeah.
Had to have the police come to remove that person from the house. Um, any tips for elder abuse? Because I know that's definitely a thing that does happen.
Yeah. So what you're talking about could have been physical. We don't know if there
Yeah,
was any kind of threats,
yeah.
but really what it sounds like mostly is exploitation, right? Financial exploitation,
Mhm.
that person was taking advantage. And we see that, especially with older adults. In fact, this Wednesday, June 15th, is World Elder Abuse Day. So everybody wear purple.
Yeah.
The smokestacks at the quarry are going to go purple this Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
And the Area Agency on Aging is all going to wear purple. I'm going to wear purple on Wednesday, but not to get off the subject, but just so y'all know, it's World Elder Abuse Day,
Yeah.
Elder Abuse Awareness Day. But yeah, I think things to look for when it comes to exploitation and abuse is looking after our older loved ones or neighbors. If we see that somebody, they maybe have a caregiver, kind of get to know what's going on in that home. Because whether they're a professional caregiver through an agency, they can still be exploitive. They can try to become like family, right? They start to share their own personal life and get to know their client's life. They start to get familiar with their banking and their assets in the home, whether it be jewelry and other things. And sometimes they feel a sense of entitlement. And if nobody's watching, right, things happen. But to be honest with you, the largest number of cases are family members for exploitation of older adults. I used to do talks on elder abuse with a colleague of mine who works for the Comel Police Department, and he was very involved in a elder fraud organization through our city. And so we'd go out and do lots of talks, even at Oasis. And one of the things I found was most of the cases are family. So we have to kind of even watch our own and say, hey, if someone has had problems with bankruptcy or debt, or they've had drug and alcohol issues, not to say that everyone's going to be exploited, but those may be individuals that are desperate. And so they might target a family member who has resources, especially someone that has dementia, may not be able to track the monies that they have. And they may not be looking to see that monies are being pulled out. So we just have to kind of be aware of what's going on in our families and our, friends and neighbors, and just kind of make ourselves visible, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. I never would have thought it would have been family was the most likely
They
to do it.
show the stats last I saw were 70% of cases were family members. And it may not be an adult child. It could be a grandchild or nephew or, whatever.
Yeah. We have a little bit of time here. I wanted to ask about a few of the things that you're doing, but let's talk about the Reframing Aging Initiative. Can you tell me what that is, what you all are doing, what the mission is for that group?
Yeah. So this is a social change endeavor, and it's actually through work that's been done through a group called Frameworks Institute, through the support of the American Society on Aging and AARP and the Gerontological Society on Aging. It's a bunch of different nonprofits that are supporting the Frameworks Institute. And what they've done is gone around and taught professionals mostly about how to combat ageism through reframing aging. And so I was just going to read real quickly so I don't mess up, because this is all kind of new for me. But framing are the choices we make and what we say and how we say it. So it's what we emphasize, how we explain things, and what we leave unsaid. So these choices matter, and they affect how people hear us, what they understand, and how they act. So for example, we use different narratives in communications. So whether it be things we see on TV, right? Like when we look at TV, we might assume all older adults are worried about just their medical care through incontinence products and through medications like pharmaceuticals, or that they're always falling because we see I've fallen and I can't get up and they're pressing a pendant. So
Mhm.
A lot of the stuff that is framed out there is kind of negative. So
Yeah.
through Reframing Aging, our job is to help professionals. So we're going out and speaking to groups like the Area Agency on Aging. We spoke to the staff at Oasis and different groups. So our goal right now, right now we're working under SALSA, which is Successfully Aging and Living in San Antonio.
Okay.
And this is a group that does all kinds of work in San Antonio, but the reframers, as we call ourselves, are going out and doing presentations right now virtually, but we hope to be in person. And we're doing Reframing Aging 101, but we're also teaching about narratives for public policy.
Mhm.
So thinking about the language we use, and some of the narratives we use are things like how you build momentum as you get older. Instead of just being frail, you're also building momentum,
Yeah.
and you're moving forward and learning new things and being able to be a part of society. You're not a burden, you're engaged and you're a part.
Love
So
that.
this is kind of in a nutshell. I'm
Yeah.
still learning it. We're just starting our talks, but it's been really interesting to speak to professionals in our community and see how they view aging and ageism.
Yeah.
So we show videos and try to get our attendees views on what they see and what they're hearing out there.
Yeah.
And try to change perceptions, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Ageism is an interesting topic because ideally, the best case scenario is you end up an older adult. You end up being someone who is that age. So I just think it's kind of interesting how.
Yeah, if we're fortunate enough, right? We get to
Yeah.
be older and get to retire and
Yeah.
enjoy things and get to travel or do things that we want to do. Hopefully we have that luxury.
Yeah.
Right?
So it just seems weird that you would throw hate that way in its exact place you're going in the ideal
I
situation.
know. We're all going to be there if we're lucky enough, right?
Yeah. If you could flip a switch and change one thing about how our society deals with aging or displays aging or thinks about it, what would you change?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think just trying to see aging as an opportunity instead of as a negative, and think about, how can you give back? Even if we're retired, what could we do with the next 10 or 20 years that we have, whether it be with our family or volunteering and giving back to the community? There's so many gifts that people are bringing to the table, right? You've got these people with tons of wisdom. They've lived through the Depression. They've seen the computer age start up.
Wow.
They've lived through different things like women's rights and seen families and things change over time.
Yeah.
They've held jobs, fought in the military, done all kinds of different jobs and tasks. So I think we want to hone all those skills and be able to share that out there with younger people, right? They could be a mentor to someone that's trying to start a business or someone that wants to start a family, share their experience.
Awesome.
And listen to the stories, right? There's some cool stories out there that a lot of us are missing. So
Yeah.
I encourage everybody out there to go speak to your grandparent or talk to an older neighbor and just hear them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make a great point there that there's a lot of wisdom you can gain from working with older adults. Cool stories. Is there a cool story that you can remember being told by an older adult, or just what is some wisdom that you've gained from?
I think the wisdom I've gained from my clients is really learning how to listen, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all so quick, especially when we start our careers, we think we have all the answers, right? Like, I went to school, I studied this, I know this stuff. But the reality is when you're working with an older adult, hey man, there's not much that you could tell them that they may not already know. And so I try to listen more and also ask the questions like, how do you want to do this? And how do you see your, care played out? Who do you want to be involved? So it's really about listening and being there through the good and bad, and being a support, and being super patient. I've learned a lot of patience in this work.
Yeah.
And my husband says, I'm not a patient person. He goes, yeah, but when you're with your peeps, you're totally different. But I'd say in normal circumstances, I'm like, chop, chop, let's get dinner going. Let's do that. I'm wanting to get things done. But I've really learned to pull back and with my work, I've learned to be a more patient person.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Another group that you talked about was a senior, was it companionship or companion program?
Senior Companion Program. I'm the
Yeah.
chair of this program,
Mhm.
and that's through the Alamo Area Council of Governments that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
It's an initiative through AmeriCorps, and what it is it pairs older adults with other older adults. So you have a volunteer paired with a beneficiary,
Mhm.
and it's a win-win. So I'm a new chair to this group, so I'm welcoming all older adults. If they want to contact me, I'm glad to. If you want to post my email,
Okay.
Joseph, we could do that. But if they want to know more about that program, I'm glad to share it.
Mhm.
And I know I sent you a flyer, but if we can post that later, that's great.
Yeah.
But this is a cool program. You do have to qualify by your income. So it's not for everyone.
Mhm.
It's looking at the, I think it's the 200% percentile of those in a bracket that are lower income that can be the volunteer.
Yeah.
But it's helpful because there's a stipend paid,
Oh, wow.
and that can kind of help offset some of the transportation costs if they're going into the home of that beneficiary.
That's awesome.
And they could do upwards of about 40 hours a week. So, they could do as little or as much as they want. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool
Definitely reach out. That's a
program to
great
combat
volunteer.
isolation, right? Combat loneliness. And
Yeah. That's so huge, I think, for a lot of different groups. And then COVID may have made that worse.
yeah,
Definitely
that
in the
definitely
past year.
has, especially if people
Yeah.
aren't, savvy with technology, right? If they don't know how to do Zoom and connect with people that way, or maybe they can't hear on a telephone. So being able to hear someone could be frustrating.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I have a question here about family dynamics. And because you said sometimes you'll see families and they're just like all getting along, they're happy-go-lucky, still making these tough decisions. What would you say is the key to that? Like, how can you build a family like that? Or what are some things you shouldn't do on the opposite side of families who are like fighting a lot? What are some basically tips for family harmony?
Well, and
Do
we
you have
can
any of those?
say that we can't always go back, right? We can't change what happened early on in our childhood. Like if we had a parent that was not supportive or they were abusive or things like that. But
Yeah.
if we're going forward as a family, maybe we let go of past hurts.
Mhm.
People can do family counseling if they so choose.
Mhm.
But moving forward and just focusing on the task at hand, if you're willing to come together to help a parent or grandparent, what does that look like? And how can everybody play a role? Maybe it's not equitable. Someone's going to maybe do more than another person, but how can everybody be a part of that decision making and be a support to that loved one, and letting go of past hurts and just moving forward? And
Okay.
maybe that's going to bring you closer together, right?
Yeah.
By working together on an issue with a parent or grandparent, maybe all those past issues are going to just kind of fade away
Yeah.
because you're working towards a common goal. So,
Yeah. Got some final questions here. Got a few minutes.
okay.
And I wanted to ask you, you obviously you care a lot about what you're doing. And I wanted to ask you, why is it that you love to do what you're doing? Like, what is the rewarding part of the work that you do?
Well, I guess I love a challenge. And, in my work, I don't always get simple cases. I usually get things that are kind of crisis driven. So I
Mhm.
like a challenge. I like to be able to come up with resources and problem solve. So I think that's a big part of why I love what I do. And I like seeing that something got solved and that people have, a happier situation or maybe a better household situation. Maybe they've gotten a caregiver that's allowed them to be able to remain at home longer. Or
Yeah.
maybe being at home is so stressful because there's so much work to be done, or the house is older and things are breaking, and being able to move into a community has been beneficial because they've been able to make new friends and not have the burden of managing a house and cooking and cleaning. So
Yeah.
I love being able to see an end result and be able to see that things can be solved sometimes. It's not always perfect, but I'm willing to take the journey with them
Yeah.
and get there.
That's
So
awesome.
it's pretty rewarding.
I love that. I feel the same way when I get a financial planning client. It's like I'm a part of the journey now with you, of your financial journey, of what you're going for your goals. So I love that.
Yeah.
My final question I always ask everybody, of course, we're going to talk about gray matters after this. I wanted to talk about your business, and I'll have the link down there so people can check it out.
Cool.
But if you could leave the audience with one final important message, what would that message be?
I think take care of yourself today, right? Because like we talked about earlier, we're all aging. If we're lucky enough to get to be 80, 70 something, right? Then how are we taking care of ourselves today? And it's not just our physical selves, it's our mental and our spiritual selves, right? Wow, so I try to, not that I got it down, but, try to have a good balance in our lives, right? Where we have, good schedules, we get some sleep, we're eating well, we're getting to exercise, whatever that looks like, man. You got to do things you enjoy or you won't do it. Yeah. So for me, it's yoga and Zumba, got to have it. Yeah. So just finding a routine and also letting go as best you can. If there's an emotional thing going on and a hurt, try to work it out, because mental health issues can really take a toll on us physically. And we're not going to get to be old if we've got unresolved issues or anger or hurts or, unsolved problems and depression, right? Nothing wrong with having a mental health issue. It's just like any other medical issue that we need to either talk it out, have a counselor, or if you need a medication, fine, or find a holistic practice help you. So I think that's my takeaway, is just take care of yourselves today so you can age well, and start planning, right? Yeah. Think about our plan. Do we have our legals or financial through maybe Joseph or someone we trust to work out our financials, and making sure that we have those funds so we can retire, right? Maybe we don't want to work to 70. Maybe we only want to work to 65. What does that look like? Can I do it? Am I going to have enough resources to be able to live successfully and be as independent as I can be?
I love that. It's a great message. That impacts everybody, no matter where you are in life. Yeah. You can be better off by letting go of past hurts, like you said, and also taking care of yourself, because sometimes we forget that, especially caregivers. I'm sure caregivers can forget that very easily.
Oh, all the time. And I'm guilty of it sometimes too. If I'm working a lot and I'm, really focused in on a problem, I'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't eat lunch today or whatever. It's like you just get so involved in the process that you forget to do things. So we have to be conscious of our own needs. And
it's real. Yeah. Awesome. And tell us about your business that you started, Gray Matters, what you guys do, what makes you different. I'd like to hear about that. And of course, I'm going to put a link right after this in the description so people can check that out.
So Gray Matters is an aging life care management business. I'm a member of the Aging Life Care Association. So if anybody wants to find a care manager anywhere in the United States, Canada, I think even the UK, they can go to www.aginglifecaremanagement.org, and they can find a care manager. But I belong to this group. I'm an advanced professional and I'm certified as a care manager. I've got my master's in gerontology. So I studied aging in graduate school and have worked in it a long time. But my business, I do a lot of different things. I do short-term consults with older adults and their adult children typically, or family members. And I also do long-term care management, where I'm checking in and monitoring care, and I'm the advocate for my client. So it's either in a hospital setting or in a nursing facility or in rehab. So I'm going to the care plan meetings, and I'm making sure that all of the care that's been promised is being delivered, that everything's being set up for them to return home. I'm also handling crises, and I also help with bill paying and different things. So I do a lot of different roles in my business.
That's awesome. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. And is there anything that you feel we wanted to get to that we missed that you want to say?
Nothing I can think of. I just really appreciate this opportunity to be with you. And I think we have a lot of exciting things coming up for us someday. I hope we can collaborate and talk together on finance and, how to age well, right? Just come up with some great talks for Oasis or other groups.
I'm going to put it on there on social media so that I have to be true to my word. We're going to probably end up doing a talk on boundaries, right? financial boundaries and boundaries within family or something like that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun.
That would be. We might get some people going, help me.
Yeah, that's a good topic. And it's so important to have boundaries.
It is. And it's hard to do, especially when I think sometimes we feel like we're so needed that we have to give in to people's whims, right? Their call comes through and we feel like we have to answer it. I've really worked hard to try to not answer those calls after hours, unless it's an emergency, right? I'll listen to the message and go, oh, this could wait till tomorrow,
Yeah.
Because we have to have our own time so that we're able to continue doing the job we do, right? The next day.
Very true. Very true. Well, so great to have you, Jill. It's so awesome to learn from your area of expertise here. And we covered a great amount of topics. We talked about stories related to advocating for older adults, tips for caring for people with dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even schizophrenia. We talked about that, elder abuse, and then also how we deal with aging on a societal level. So it's been fun to talk about all these things. And I thank you very much. I'm going to end the stream here. And I thank all my viewers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for more weekly interviews and content that I create related